In today's episode, we'll discuss why it's important more than ever to articulate the true value of higher education going beyond degrees and diplomas. Let's talk about holistic success. Hi everyone, I'm Anju Visen-Singh, VP of Product and Marketing at Acuity Insights. Welcome to this episode of our Holistic Success Show. Here with me today is Dr. Kelly Dore. She is the co-founder and VP Science and Innovation at Acuity Insights, and we are thrilled to have her here to talk to us about the value of higher education. Kelly is a PhD researcher with a background in cognitive psychology and higher education. She is also an adjunct professor at McMaster University and an international speaker and thought leader in holistic success in education. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you, Anju. I am so excited to be here and talk about the value of higher education because it is something that we are hearing more and more and more about. So thrilled that we can at least have this conversation today, and I'm sure many more in the future.
So, we're talking about the value of higher education today. And if you Google this topic, you will find thousands of media articles that come up from some of the best known, best read publications on actually the falling value of higher education. So, what do you think is driving this narrative of skepticism and negativity?
Yeah, I think it's multi-factored as we think about the way people are talking about higher education now. I mean, first and foremost for so many people is just the cost. I can tell you when I had my kids who are now in elementary school, we started trying to save and figure out how are we going to pay for their higher education that they might want to do, because the cost of it was just hard to imagine having the amount of money on hand. And we were lucky enough to be able to find a way to start putting money aside for them, for the future. But that's not the reality for a lot of families. And the cost of higher education is only increasing as schools are facing rising costs, more limited resources, and implications to basically provide all of the supports that they need to provide for students, while still at the same time supporting their faculty, providing the infrastructure around higher education. And so as there have been changes to financial aid, sometimes delays or uncertainty, higher interest rates, the uncertainty and complexity of it can really just become very, very overwhelming. And, if we even put aside the costs, which, is a very important piece, and the reality of most people trying to figure out how are we going to afford this, and is it worth the debt that we're going to incur? There's a lot of conversations about, debt relief for students, but there's no certainty around that. So it's just knowing that you're going to have this ongoing payment when you graduate. People are starting to question, well, what is the outcome that I'm going to get from going to higher education that is going to put me above and beyond everyone else? Universities have historically been described as the place where we impart knowledge, and where you go to learn. That's the way we describe it. But what we know is the world is changing so fast. With AI, online courses that are available, the knowledge is at your fingertips. And so it's not the requirement necessarily in some cases to feel like you have to go for a full degree, that you have to pay that level of cost in order to get that information. And as an academic, I can very much say that academia is slow to change. So it's slower to respond to, the AI or the online courses that exist in competition to what they are. We know that programs are also driving to change the courses that they offer to get more revenue, as universities are saying we need enough revenue to be able to offer certain programs or offer certain complexities. So they're changing the nature of the courses. And what that means is that students at the end of the day don't understand the return on investment that they're getting for the 2 to 4 years of tuition or more in some cases that they're putting into the institutions. And so it becomes very difficult to demonstrate that to them, because it's up to the individual institutions. But that means the student themselves has to actually decide to go and look and say, what am I going to get? And the institutions have to be able to describe it. And I would say it's also complex because, as you said, there's lots of questions about what is the value of higher education? What is this? And we hear that loud and clear in the media, but we don't hear the other side. There's no solidified or united voices really to explain and advocate for the value of higher educations for institutions in general. So, really ensuring that we're still creating this pipeline of students, we're not losing people in the funnel, especially those who are traditionally underrepresented in higher education.
A lot of this narrative is based on this whole job placement piece, right? Which is, related to, will I get a job? What will my salary be? And when you compare that with the cost of higher education, there is that whole ROI question that comes up that you brought up. And in fact, as per Pew Research, 4 in 10 Americans say that a college degree is not too important or not at all important in getting a well-paying job. So in addition to a whole lot of other types of jobs that have come up. For instance, if you think about, to take a very extreme and visible example of social media influencers who are able to make a lot of money without necessarily having to have a degree. And when you couple that with the fact that a number of leading businesses have said they will no longer require a degree as an entry point into their jobs, and we had heard that even the federal governments in certain countries are now going to say that. So that really begs the question of what really are some of the other benefits beyond jobs and how much you're going to get paid based on your degree or the institution you graduate out of. That should actually institutions should be highlighting more.
I think you're so right, Anju. And, that just adds to the confusion a lot of folks face because it's true that there are entry level jobs that are going to be available, and some roles won't require a higher degree. But I think what needs to happen is the conversation around what a potential student might want in the future. So, to use your example of social media as well, there are social influencer jobs available, and they certainly don't require a degree. Although perhaps the reality is a business degree might even potentially help them. But the likelihood of success in those particular roles is few and far between. It's sort of, wanting to become, an actor. And those who, actually get Oscars and have the multi-million-dollar contracts is few and far between those who actually want to enter the acting workforce. And I think that's an example of, yes, there can be those jobs, and they're in our faces as we open our phones every day. But the reality is, it's a small portion of those who are actually going to be successful and successful for a lifetime. So one of the things that we know is that not only is workforce changing and the nature of jobs changing, but increasingly when people enter the workforce, they enter different roles and they're able to move between jobs much more frequently than has been historically allowed. And so, what we need to do, higher ed needs to think about how they are prepping people for the future of workforce and being workplace ready. And so, I think that is the articulation that they need to talk about is what are the differentiating factors for those who are entering straight out of high school and those who are entering out of higher education? Is the entry points different? How does that change your lifetime income earning potential? And not to make it all about money, but we do want to ensure that we have stable support, financial support for our family, healthcare, all of those sorts of things that we can provide, and that we can actually do a job that we want to do. So, how does higher education help us prepare us to do a job that we're passionate about, that we're more interested in and engaged in, versus one that just pays the bills? And I think that is one of the opportunities that we have in higher education is to really focus on that workplace readiness and helping people find careers, not just jobs, even if they change careers several times. I'm somebody who changed careers partway through and love it and am passionate about it and have been able to do that because I had a higher education degree. But I think what we can do is ensure that we're connecting employers and institutions to think about who are the future leaders and employees that they're going to be in demand. There's always going to be the opportunity, and I think it's great for people to enter the workforce from high school. But there's going to be different opportunities afforded to those who can enter the workforce from a higher education or with a higher education degree or training. And so that is part of the conversation that we need to have is not just that, yes, you can get a job coming out of high school, but that you can actually get a job that you're passionate about and have choice if you come with a higher education degree. And so when we think about what are some of the other benefits that higher education programs should be highlighting, I think it's the uniqueness that they can do that actually helps you prepare for the workforce. So it's again thinking about that holistic success of the learner having come through their program. So, how are they connecting students to employers early on to get opportunities and think about what are the growth and experiential opportunities that they can have to find out what things that they get them excited, what areas they're interested in, what areas they're passionate about, and what they might want to do as their first, second, third step in career and start thinking about how they create those building blocks. I think going back to higher education programs, thinking about leveraging their mission. So, thinking about how do we help and support a particular group of students in our communities as well, so that we can be engaged members of those communities and really not only create sustainability for those students getting into employment, but for those employers in our community as well, so that they actually create this flywheel where they can actually build opportunities for people to enter the workforce at a higher stage, at a higher state, or maybe enter a different part of the workforce than they even saw possible through these opportunities and workforce readiness plans that they have. But that all requires institutions to take a step back and think more broadly about what the skill sets are that employers want to hire for now. Because the reality is there's lots of jobs that are out there, but AI and other changing technology is fundamentally changing the nature of jobs. And that comes from Deloitte. They've said, there's a lot of changes coming into the nature of the jobs that we're going to be doing. So, how are institutions partnering with employers to understand what is workforce readiness at the end of higher education? Because I think if we don't, if higher education institutions aren't highlighting that value of growth, that value of their employment, then the reality is if they're not keeping up with what employers are looking for, then it will start to become less and less differentiated between job entry out of high school and job entry out of higher education. When we have a huge opportunity to say there's actually more skill sets that higher institutions can help prepare students for, to help them get work ready and help them enter the workforce in a way that leverages the value of that higher education.
Yeah, that is so true, Kelly. And even as you were talking, and you were talking about skills and so on. It's like that shift from focus on knowledge to focus on skills, while also having the skills to get more and more knowledge as you go. And like when you then start to wrap up things like life skills, social skills, the ability to, you hear so much of your lifelong friendships coming from your time in college and stuff like that. There's just so much wrapped into it, yeah, with the student experience, with skills that you develop by purely being part of that process of higher education. How do we bring all of that together and start to really package it and communicate it more fully?
Absolutely. And this is where that partnership between institutions and industry really starts to get stronger. And it's finding out what are the nature of those skills that we actually need. I love the term, we sometimes have called them non cognitive or non academic because they've been outside of knowledge that we need. But I love the term that we're starting to use, which is durable skills. These are the skills that we will help build and prepare these students for, and they can carry across the different careers that they're going to have in their life. And, that's things like leadership, communication, teamwork, advocacy, all of the other things that are so incredibly important alongside the knowledge and the skills. And a lot of that means how do we take the things that they're learning in the classroom and start to give them the opportunity to build those skill sets in their durable skills so that they're entering the workforce, they're almost gaining years of experience that some people are getting right out of high school. They're building that at a multiplied level in higher education to enter that workforce in a way that's going to really allow them to shine and then be able to describe that return on investment to potential applicants to be able to say, we're not just standing at the front giving you a lecture here. It's not that something you could watch online or on a YouTube channel. It's very much there's a value in coming to campus, in engaging, in working through and applying this knowledge that is going to make you prepared for the workforce in a completely different way.
Yeah. And when you talk about workforce, it's not just, the companies that are waiting over there to hire you. We know with AI and ML, there will be many more companies of one, two, three people. And so, how do you have all of those skills to get in there, with to be able to really make a success of those endeavors that you might be undertaking, whether it's your own thing or whether it is joining, something that already exists.
And changing topics too, right? So instead of just teaching them traditional skill sets, you're also teaching them entrepreneurship, you're teaching them
Yes.
other things from a very early stage so that they're starting to figure out, okay, what do these skills and information and ways of thinking inform me starting my own business, working for a company, being out in the job force? How does it inform that and actually get applied?
Yeah, so true. It's going to be a very different future, and how higher education is preparing you for that is something that really needs to come to the fore. Okay, so we've talked about all of this value that institutions can offer, but how can they be thinking about better articulating this value to prospective students and their families?
Absolutely. So I think when we talk about the institutions, we need to think about how are we explaining the return on investment? How can we break down something that's actually really complex and far in the future, the value that they're going to get from this 3 4 year degree that they're going to be in, and actually understand what the impact is going to be on their families, from day one when they graduate, the types of jobs that they're going to have, what's going to be the impact in 10 years, in 20 years. How do we describe and explain that? Because I think sometimes that can seem so far off in the future that, it feels better to just get in and get a job now, start getting that paycheck. And so, what is it that holding off on starting full time employment can be or can do for you? And so, I think it's that. I think it's that ROI also, for the institution to explain that in a very mission driven way. Because a lot of times students are increasingly wanting to know what the mission is of the program and using that to help select which programs they want to go to because it's so important that they're aligned from a purpose and a mission driven perspective that schools really need to latch on and leverage that and sort of talk about their mission from recruitment to graduation to alumni so that they can bring people through and not only create strong students but strong alumni as well who are
Mhm.
going to be the employers of potentially their future students. And so really making sure that they're aligning that they're speaking to that, that they're explaining that in the context of the value of their training. What are the unique things that they're doing in their programs that are going to help them set them up for job readiness? But I think it's also not just institutions. We talk about the fact that there's all these voices out there in the media and other places challenging higher education. We need advocates on the other side. We need a unifying factor to talk about and explain the value of higher education, the generational impact financially that it can have for families to
Yes.
attend a higher education institution and get that degree, the success that they're going to have and the confidence they're going to build, and how it's going to actually help them better prepare to navigate jobs, and into things that they're very, very passionate about, how it's going to better help them prepare for the future and the complexities and the outside the box problem solving we're going to have to do around the problems in the future. I think that is the piece that can't just come from the institutions. It has to come from all of the oversight groups when we think about whether they're thinking about professional programs, be it medicine or law or anything else, or whether we're thinking about getting people into business degrees or whether we're thinking about getting people into humanities programs. What is the value? And there needs to be advocacy, not just at the institutional level, but at the national and international levels as well.
You touched upon this a little bit, in terms of entrepreneurship and those getting those skills. But are there things within the program, changes within the program that institutions could be thinking about to, further enhance the value?
You're so right, Anju, that we know academia changes slowly. So this might be at the level of the program. or the faculty individually, but ideally the institution can encourage these changes and these opportunities that we think are going to actually change what we can provide for our students and really help with that job readiness. It can start with something as simple as the fact that when we measure these durable skills, whether it's things like communication or teamwork, in some ways it's sort of a box ticking exercise.
Mhm.
You're sort of measuring it alongside something else. You're saying that you're measuring it, but are you truly driving their learning and their growth in that area, or are you just sort of assessing where they're at? So I think the more we can create an opportunity to really see some of those things and create a growth mindset around some of these more durable skills, I think we can drive their growth. And again, then that drives what people are able to achieve after they've completed their training. We've talked about opportunities to create workforce like situations. Those, are very common in places where they have full internships or co-op placements that they're able to do. But in some cases, because those aren't available, you're able to even do these very rapid mini placements where you're able to go into a workplace for a shorter period of time because longer time is not available within whether it's the curriculum or because of the work nature of the work itself. But providing those opportunities to experience and expose people to different types of jobs, different areas in the workforce to help them figure out what is it that they love, because that should be the purpose of higher education partially in itself, is that you shouldn't necessarily come into higher education knowing exactly what you want. You should be able to use your time in higher education to figure that out and then grow and develop and create a plan to be where you want to be. And you need the exposure in order to do that. For programs that can't connect with employers, or the reality of doing an internship or even mini placements are hard, you could move to a model of a bit of a flipped classroom where the time is spent outside the classroom watching the recorded lecture that we know exists because, whether people recorded it in COVID or you could do it in advance, there's a chance to watch and digest that information. Then the time in class is actually about applying it. So it is providing that unique experience that is often not allowed to happen, if we're just watching something asynchronously or we're just digesting a lecture that we've heard. How do you use problem or case-based learning using that flipped classroom model where instead of just listening to a lecture, you're actually coming together with classmates to solve a problem? And what that does is it creates these opportunities to practice work placement type of things, solve real problems with the knowledge that you're learning. And that's what's helping people grow and explore and feel like they better understand the knowledge because they're applying it in the moment. And that is the huge advantage that we can provide. So it doesn't have to be a fundamental change in, finding co-ops or internships, but finding a way for people to start applying what we're giving them in the class, the knowledge and the durable skills and all of those things, and pulling it together to create that workforce readiness.
Yeah, there is a program that I am, fortunate to be privileged to be an advisor on here in Calgary that is actually looking to completely shift from curriculum being focused on knowledge, of the topic of the subject to actually skills. So the skills that are required, and then so they have flipped it, and of course you have to learn the knowledge as well. But the primary focus of the program, is really using the skills based framework to teach knowledge versus the other way around. So that is really, so it's really great. Like I say, I think many educators are in higher education are thinking about things like these. We just need to see maybe a little more movement in this area as well.
Absolutely. And what's exciting is that we're actually seeing some of those changes in high school programming as well. And so, one of the things we've talked a lot about looking forward to what people are doing in the workplace, but we also need to look towards where people are coming from. And if high schools are starting to change and do more of these problem based learning types of models or flipped classroom approaches, maybe not everywhere, but in some cases, in some small courses, How are we making sure that we're demonstrating we're caught up to high school level education in terms of the way we're approaching the curriculum as well?
Yes, so true. Okay. So you talked about this a little bit before, Kelly, partnerships with higher education and industry. And how should we be thinking about that reshaping the public perception of the value of the degree?
Absolutely. This is something I think, we hear faculty talking about this, we hear programs, and we hear industry talking about this too. That there's a massive disconnect between education and what industry is doing or providing. And I think, sometimes even have faculty members who have been teaching for a long time, but have been a little bit disconnected from the workforce, especially with the massive changes that have happened. And so I think there are opportunities both at the student level, at the curriculum level, but also at the faculty level to engage and talk about what is this course that you're teaching and how is it getting applied in the workforce, and making that connection so that the faculty can start to impart that understanding not just of what the knowledge is, but what it actually means for them in the workforce. Again, we've talked about tons of opportunities for students, but having them able to influence the faculty and the curriculum, because a lot of faculty may think about this idea of a flipped classroom and go, well, where would I even start? And I think, the knowledge is that unique piece. That lecture you're giving online is the unique content that you can provide as a faculty member. And then partnering with industry to sort of say, what are the problems that we can do to address it and apply this knowledge and start to, move to that next level of thinking about it, is a great way and that partnership can happen. The more we create those partnerships, the better, because then we're actually training in higher education for the skill sets that are needed for workforce. And we're hearing that from industry too. They want that. They want to know that they're not going to have to do a ton of training when they bring people in from higher education.
Yes, yes. And I was just thinking so many programs have industry advisory groups, but the interactions tend to stay at the leadership level versus actually permeating all the way to, the entire faculty or all the faculty members. So, and also those groups tend to be engaged by only certain types of programs versus all types of programs. So, maybe more can be done in that area as well. Yeah, so thanks for sharing all of this wonderful information, Kelly. What a great conversation this was. Any final piece of advice?
I really think programs in higher education have their own unique opportunities. So each program is unique. They offer different things to students. They have their own mission, and they need to leverage that. They need to speak about the value of what they're doing, and making sure it's part of their message from recruitment all the way through to their alumni, so that they're reinforcing, because creating advocates within the program is going to be helpful for them, but also making sure that they're holding true to their mission and that they're able to listen, as you say, to those who have graduated, to say, did this, how did this help you? How do we understand? And using those stories as part of what they're sharing for the next group of students coming through.
Yeah, and also using it as input to continue to refine and develop. So
100%.
great. Thank you so much for sharing these insights with us, Kelly, and this great discussion today. To all of you, thanks for watching and listening. If you haven't subscribed to our show already, please do so and share the episode with any colleagues that you think might find it useful. So we will catch you in the next episode. Thank you. If you enjoyed this episode of the Holistic Success Show, please be sure to check out our other episodes. We have episodes coming out regularly all the time, so please be sure to subscribe so that you can stay up to date on all things related to student and program success in higher education.